Henry VIII is famous for his 6 wives, but what about the women who raised those queens? Behind every bride stood a mother, shaping their lives, guiding their choices, and sometimes influencing England itself. In this first part, we'll uncover the stories of 3 of these remarkable women: Isabella of Castile, the formidable queen who shaped Catherine of Aragon; Elizabeth Boleyn, the mother of the most controversial of Henry's queens; and Marjorie Wentworth, whose daughter Jane would become his quietest consort. These mothers-in-law played a hidden but powerful role in Tudor history. How did a Spanish queen become the mother-in-law of a Tudor queen and reshape the course of European history? Isabella I of Castile was born on April 22nd, 1451, in Madrigal de las Altas Torres in Spain, into a realm divided by conflict and dynastic rivalry. Her father, John II of Castile, died when she was just 3 years old, leaving the throne to a half-brother, Henry IV. Isabella grew up in a court marked by instability and political intrigue, yet from these beginnings she would rise to become one of the most powerful women in European history. In 1469, Isabella defied the expectations of her court and married Ferdinand of Aragon, a fellow royal and her second cousin. The match, carried out in secret, was a political masterstroke. By uniting the 2 largest kingdoms of the Iberian Peninsula, Isabella and Ferdinand laid foundations for a unified Spain. When Isabella became Queen of Castile in 1474 and Ferdinand ascended the throne of Aragon in 1479, they ruled as joint sovereigns. Though their realms remained legally separate, they acted in near-complete coordination, earning them the title the Catholic monarchs. Their reign transformed Spain. Together, they completed the Reconquista, a centuries-long campaign to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule. In 1492, the same year, they captured Granada, the last Muslim stronghold. Isabella and Ferdinand sponsored Christopher Columbus's voyage, launching Spain into an age of global exploration and empire. Isabella's rule was marked by devout Catholicism, a defining force in her political and personal life. Her zeal helped establish the infamous Spanish Inquisition in 1478, targeting converted Jews and Muslims suspected of secretly practicing their old faiths. In 1492, she and Ferdinand issued the Alhambra Decree, expelling all unconverted Jews from Spain. These decisions brought long-lasting consequences for Spanish society and its economy, but from Isabella's perspective, they were acts of spiritual and national purification. Isabella was also a reformer. She professionalized the royal bureaucracy, promoted education, and supported scholars and artists. Her court became a centre of Renaissance thought. Unlike many monarchs of the period, she took an active role in governing, issuing laws, directing policy, and even reviewing petitions from her subjects herself. Among her 5 children, none was more significant to English history than her youngest daughter, Catherine of Aragon. Born in 1485, Catherine was raised with the highest expectations. She was educated in languages, philosophy, theology, and domestic management. Isabella ensured her daughter would one day make a formidable queen. Catherine was betrothed to Arthur, Prince of Wales, the eldest son of England's King Henry VII. The alliance was part of Isabella's broader strategy to strengthen Spain's position in Europe through dynastic marriages. Catherine sailed to England in 1501 and married Arthur, but their union was tragically brief. Arthur died just months later. Isabella, devastated, sought to ensure her daughter's future. She began negotiations for Catherine to marry Arthur's younger brother, Henry, but before these could be concluded, Isabella fell ill. She died on November 26, 1504, in Medina del Campo, at the age of 53. Her death created political complications, though her will made clear that her daughter, Joanna, was to inherit Castile. Joanna's mental instability and the ambitions of her husband, Philip the Handsome, threw Spain into turmoil. Catherine would go on to marry Henry VIII in 1509, becoming Queen of England. Her strong Catholic faith and a sense of duty bore the stamp of her mother's influence. And when Henry later sought to annul their marriage, Catherine invoked her mother's legacy and her own royal dignity in her defence. "I am the daughter of Isabella the Catholic," she told her court. It was both a reminder and a warning. Isabella I of Castile was more than a queen. She was a nation builder, a devout crusader, and the matriarch of a powerful dynasty. Through her daughter Catherine, she became a key figure in the story of England's Tudors. Her influence shaped the lives of Henry VIII, his court, and the entire course of English history. What does it mean to be the mother of a queen who loses her crown and her head? Long before Anne Boleyn changed the course of English history, there was Elizabeth Boleyn, the elegant and ambitious woman who raised her. She stood at the crossroads of two powerful worlds, the old Plantagenet bloodlines and the rising fortunes of the Tudor court. But while her daughter would become queen, Elizabeth's own legacy would be forever shadowed by the violent downfall of the girl she brought into the world. Elizabeth Boleyn was born Elizabeth Howard sometime around 1480 into one of England's most powerful and ancient families. She was the daughter of Thomas Howard, then Earl of Surrey and later the second Duke of Norfolk, and Elizabeth Tilney, a woman from noble East Anglian stock. The Howard family had long-standing influence, and Elizabeth grew up in a household shaped by the shifting alliances of the Wars of the Roses. By birth, Elizabeth was a granddaughter of John Howard, the first Duke of Norfolk, a key supporter of Richard III. Her family's loyalties, however, shifted carefully with the tide. After Richard's defeat at Bosworth in 1485, her father pledged fealty to Henry VII, helping the Howards maintain their lands and status under the new Tudor regime. Around 1499 or 1500, Elizabeth married Thomas Boleyn, a rising courtier and diplomat. His family wasn't as ancient or powerful as the Howards, but they were ambitious. Elizabeth brought in both prestige and a valuable connection to nobility. The union was a political match, but it would become one of the most consequential pairings in Tudor history. Elizabeth joined the court of Elizabeth of York, the Queen Consort of Henry VII, and later served Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife. She was respected, well-educated, and deeply connected to court life, and by this time she had given birth to several children, though many would not survive infancy. Her three surviving children were Mary, George, and Anne, all of whom were destined for dramatic roles during Henry VIII's reign. Elizabeth's own involvement in their futures was quiet but crucial. She made sure her daughters received a courtly, French-influenced education. She understood that their future belonged to those who could speak the language of diplomacy, wit, and charm. By the 1520s, Elizabeth was part of the inner circle at court. She watched as her younger daughter Anne returned from years abroad in the Netherlands and France and soon caught the king's eye. Elizabeth, no stranger to court intrigue, must have seen the danger ahead, but the rewards were too high to ignore. As Anne became the king's obsession, Thomas and Elizabeth found themselves at the heart of a rising faction. Elizabeth is believed to have been present at Anne's secret marriage to Henry VIII in 1533 and attended her coronation later that year. She had officially become the mother of the Queen of England, a dizzying rise for a woman born during the last years of the Plantagenet era. But court favour was fleeting, and power came at a price. In May 1536, Elizabeth's world came crashing down. Anne was arrested, accused of adultery, incest and treason. Her son George, now Lord Rochford, was also arrested. The charges were shocking, with many saying they were fabricated, but they were enough to ensure a brutal outcome. Elizabeth's role in these final days is unclear. She was not present at Anne's trial or execution. Some believe she withdrew from court, devastated. Others say she tried to plead with the king or retreated to Hever Castle in despair. What's certain is that on May the 17th, she lost her son to the executioner's axe. 2 days later, her daughter followed. The family's prestige was wiped out almost overnight. Thomas Boleyn returned to court briefly, but Elizabeth never did. She died on April the 3rd, 1538, just 2 years after her children's execution. She was buried at St Mary's Church in Lambeth, now the Garden Museum, in an unmarked grave beside her husband. Today, Elizabeth Boleyn is often remembered only as the mother of Anne, but she was more than that. She represented a generation of noble women who lived at the edge of power, educated, connected, politically aware, but limited by rules of their time. She guided her children into a world of influence, only to see that world destroy them. Without Elizabeth's lineage, ambition and courtly skill, Anne Boleyn might never have risen to become queen, and the English Reformation may have taken a different path. What if the mother of England's most tragic queen were the very picture of everything her daughter would lose: respect, peace, and safety? Marjorie Wentworth didn't chase power. She didn't scandalise the court, plot for thrones, or leave a trail of enemies behind her. Yet her life mattered because Marjorie raised Jane Seymour, the woman who would capture Henry VIII's heart and give him one thing no other wife could: a legitimate male heir. Behind Jane's brief and bittersweet reign stands Marjorie Wentworth, a deeply connected noblewoman whose quiet dignity shaped one of the most pivotal Tudor queens. Marjorie Wentworth was born around 1478 into a world still healing from the Wars of the Roses. Her family, the Wentworths of Nettlestead in Suffolk, had deep roots in English nobility. Her father, Sir Henry Wentworth, was a respected landowner and courtier, and her mother, Anne Say, was descended from the powerful Barons de Say and was a first cousin to Elizabeth Woodville, Queen to Edward IV. Through this connection, Marjorie was distantly related to Elizabeth of York, Henry VII's queen, making Marjorie and later her daughter Jane part of the vast network of Plantagenet Tudor kinship. Margaret was also a niece of Sir Richard Wentworth and a cousin to Margaret Beaufort, the formidable mother of Henry VII. These ties made the Wentworths respected allies under the new Tudor dynasty, helping to ensure their place at court during the early reign of Henry VIII. Sometime in the mid-1490s, Marjorie married Sir John Seymour of Woolfall in Wiltshire, a soldier and knight of the body to both Henry VII and later Henry VIII. Their marriage was not just politically sound, but by all accounts stable and affectionate. The couple had at least 10 children, though not all survived infancy. Their most famous child, of course, was Jane Seymour, born around 1508. Others included Edward Seymour, who would go on to become Duke of Somerset and Lord Protector during the reign of his nephew, Edward VI, and Thomas Seymour, who would later marry Henry VIII's widow, Catherine Parr. Marjorie raised their children in a household that valued honour, modesty, and education. Jane's later reputation for gentleness and obedience, the very qualities Henry VIII praised as a balm after the storm of Anne Boleyn, was almost certainly shaped by her mother's quiet strength. When Anne Boleyn was executed in May 1536 and Henry VIII married Jane Seymour just days later, Marjorie suddenly became the Queen's mother. But unlike Elizabeth Boleyn or Elizabeth Woodville, Marjorie didn't push herself into the political spotlight. She remained at Woolfall and did not become a prominent figure at court. Yet her position was suddenly exalted. Her son Edward was rapidly promoted, and the Seymours' family fortunes soared. Jane's pregnancy in 1537 was a national celebration, and on October the 12th she gave birth to Edward VI, the long-awaited male heir to the throne. But the joy didn't last, and Jane died just 12 days later, likely from postpartum complications. Marjorie had outlived her daughter, but not the consequences of Jane's queenship. Marjorie never fully returned to the public stage after Jane's death. Her sons, especially Edward and Thomas, became central figures in the new regime when Edward VI ascended to the throne as a child in 1547. Marjorie would have watched with both pride and apprehension as her sons gained titles and power, only to make fatal mistakes. Her son Thomas Seymour was executed in 1549 for plotting against the crown, and her other son Edward fell from grace in 1552 and was also executed. Marjorie died around October 1550, likely at Wolf Hall. She had seen the heights of her family's rise, the beginnings of its fall. Marjorie Wentworth never wore a crown, but her influence endured through her children, particularly Jane, the Queen who briefly brought peace to a turbulent court. She was also renowned in her time for her beauty and culture. The poet John Skelton celebrated her in verse, praising her virtuous conditions and calling her the fair Margaret of Wentworth. Her virtues, modesty, piety and honour became the very image Henry VIII projected onto Jane Seymour. Marjorie's legacy is a reminder that sometimes quiet influence lasts longer than political noise. That was the first half of our journey into the lives of Henry VIII's 6 mothers-in-law, women who shaped the queens we know so well. Next time, we'll meet the final 3, Maria of Ulickburg, Joyce Culpeper and Maud Green. Don't miss it. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like, leave a comment with your thoughts and subscribe so you don't miss part 2. Your support really helps bring more of these hidden stories from history to life.